Today, Rome's water fountains pump millions of gallons of fresh water into the city. Trevi Fountain alone pours out 22 million gallons of water each day, all of it still coming from an original Roman aqueduct. Romans had been building elaborate fountains for over 2,000 years. The constant flow of fresh water came to symbolize the health and wealth of the city. Yet with all of the towering aqueducts and elaborate fountains above the ground, most of the ancient city's waterworks are still buried 25 feet beneath the streets. Hi, Katie. Thanks for meeting with me.
Hi, nice to meet you, Eric. On the other side.
I met with Katie Parla, a guide who specializes in Rome's underworld. She was taking me to what seemed like an ordinary fountain, but this fountain was different. It was a symbol of power in ancient Rome. Today, the ground level has risen over 25 feet, so believe it or not, the fountain is actually buried underneath this modern apartment building.
We have to envision late Republican Rome. Delete the Colosseum and fill this area with the villas of Roman aristocrats, public buildings, offices, commercial spaces, and residential areas.
So the Colosseum is not here.
Right, the fountain was built in 50 BC, which was more than 100 years before the Colosseum was constructed.
In fact, in 50 BC, not only was the Colosseum not there, but much of the hill itself was actually level. After more than 2,000 years of construction and destruction, the hill today is actually the rubble of ancient Rome. But tucked away along the retaining wall is a door that most people would never notice. A door that's not open to the public. That would take us over 2,000 years back in time. We were headed down to an ancient fountain that was unearthed in 1894 during construction of the street above us. Kind of a narrow stairway here, Katie.
Yep, it's a spiral staircase leading down into the Nymphaeum.
The Nymphaeum was a monumental fountain built on a private villa or domo around 50 BC. The worship of nymphs or sea goddesses was common in Rome, emphasizing the importance of water in the ancient world. 2,000 years ago, this would have been a semicircular fountain adorned with shells. There were several niches with statues inside, and most likely, a pool in front of it. Today, it's a time capsule, preserved beneath the streets.
Right, we're looking at 4 of 9 original niches that formed part of an nymphaeum, or monumental fountain. So we've got to imagine 5 niches continuing in a semicircular shape towards the modern street that we just left. Water would have flowed here, and in order to reinforce the water aspect, the decorations in the niches and on the walls include seashells.
Fountains were more than just decorations in ancient Rome. They were a mark of an advanced society, one that was concerned about hygiene, and one that could harness water. The fountain was a link to Rome's ancient waterworks, one of the key ingredients to the rise of Rome, and I was standing in the middle of it. 2,000 years ago, we would have been underwater.
The fountain would have been fed by a water source that was not necessarily visible. I mean, the whole aspect here of having this nymphaeum is to posit it as a naturally occurring spring that this aristocrat just happened to build a house around. So we're supposed to be tricked into thinking that he's tamed nature in some way, whereas this is absolutely a man-made structure that was supplied by probably lead pipes that fed the water to this site.
Even without modern machinery, early Romans created an elaborate world of plumbing. Here's how it worked. The water's journey began over 40 miles away. It ran through the Aqua Ania Vetus, a winding aqueduct that sat almost entirely underground. Once the water approached the outskirts of the city, it poured into large castella, or cisterns. Today, these cisterns are scattered and buried throughout the modern city, like this one, that still sits in the middle of a business park. It's off limits to the public, but Katie agreed to take me down. You can feel it getting colder as we walk down.
Yeah, it's a little humid too.
This is much bigger than I anticipated. You can't see it from the outside. But this snake's around and I can see there's different chambers. I mean, here's a chamber right here, And I can see beyond that one, and around there, and around there. I mean, this is quite a structure. Not only is it amazing that 2,000 years ago, Romans knew how to get this much water here. Once it was here, they also installed an elaborate system of purification. These cisterns, or castella, purified the water and then redistributed the water to smaller holding tanks. But how? The cistern was designed with 2 concentric rings and a center cylinder, where the water entered. From there, the water would flow through the openings in the walls into the next ring.
So the water would enter in one part of the building, it would circulate around the structure, but the separate rooms would cause the water to slow down in its path. So this would allow the particles in suspension to fall away.
As the water moved through the rings, the openings slowed the water down. The dirt and debris in the water would fall to the floor, and the purified water continued through the cistern and out through a channel on the opposite end. Other cisterns throughout the city used this ingenious combination of gravity and circulation to purify the water. But this was no ordinary cistern.
The cistern is about 50 feet in diameter, and the chambers are about 20 feet in height, which makes it unusually large if it was for private or domestic use, implying it was used for agriculture industry.
More than 5 times the size of the standard Roman cistern, it's likely that this was built to water a large industrial farm that helped to feed the citizens of Rome. But how did they prevent the pressure of more than 200,000 gallons of moving water from cracking the outer walls? So you can see a lot of exposed brick, but then you have this really thick mortar. Right here, there's a huge patch that's missing. Why was the mortar so thick?
Well, this is a traditional thickness for plaster in antiquity, and this particular plaster is a waterproof plaster.
The Romans invented this waterproof plaster. Just one more example of how advanced the Romans were. But that's not all. Besides the waterproof plaster, the walls of this cistern were designed to withstand tremendous force.
This is tufa, which is a local volcanic stone, and these are pyramidal pieces that were embedded in the concrete core. Now what we don't see is that above and below the tufa construction are parallel lines of bricks. And when you see these 2 arrangements beside one another, this is a technique called opus mixtum.
And why would they mix them?
You've got 2 different types of compressive materials pushing up against one another. They thrive under pressure, they create a stronger building.
The 2 layers of brick work like a vise, pushing the concrete and tufa layers together. The more pressure pushing against the layers, the stronger they become. It's no surprise that in Rome you can go beneath the streets to uncover an ancient water world. A world that made it possible for the empire to become the largest in the world. It may look like just a fountain, but it was much more. Up next, the buried retreat of Rome's emperors. This is brilliant.
It's cracked up, but the stucco itself was painted.
This is really gorgeous.
It's one of ancient Rome's most famous urban legends. Is the word testify derived from the Roman custom of holding one's testicles when testifying in court? To find out the real answer, go to history.com/cities for our new web series, The Naked Underground.
For over 2,000 years, Rome has had a terrible problem with traffic. At one point, Julius Caesar actually banned carriages and wagons in the city. And today, it isn't much better. But banning traffic in a modern-day city isn't realistic. So the solution seems simple. Build new roads. The problem? Everywhere you dig, you run into the remains of the past.